I gave up custody of my son to save his future. His graduation speech left the room silent. I, 45M, sat in the back row of the auditorium, trying to make myself as invisible as possible. My ex-wife and her husband were seated in the front row, exactly where parents of the valedictorian should be. I hadn't planned on coming, but my son's email a week ago changed everything. I kept rereading it on my phone, making sure I hadn't imagined it. I know we haven't really talked, but I'm giving the valedictorian speech at graduation. I'd really like you to be there. The guilt still eats at me every day, but sitting here, watching other parents proudly take photos and hug their kids, it's particularly devastating. A woman next to me is dabbing her eyes with tissues, talking about how fast 18 years went by. I want to tell her try missing 15 of those years. Try having only photographs and secondhand stories of your child growing up. 15 years. That's how long it had been since I made the hardest decision of my life. I was a mess back then, fresh out of my second rehab stint in 3 years, drowning in $87,000 of gambling debt, and barely holding on to a minimum wage job at a warehouse. My son was only 3, and my ex-wife had recently remarried to a successful businessman. They lived in a good school district, could afford the best health care, and most importantly, could give my son the stability I couldn't. I still remember that day in painful detail. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and I was sitting in their living room, a room that cost more than what I made in a year. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the coffee mug they'd given me. My ex-wife looked uncomfortable, but her husband was direct. They wanted to discuss adoption. He needs stability, my ex-wife said softly. He needs a future we can count on. I wanted to argue. I wanted to scream that I was his father, that I was trying, that I'd get better. But then my son toddled into the room wearing new shoes I knew I couldn't have afforded, and carrying a picture book about dinosaurs. Her husband scooped him up naturally, and my son laughed that beautiful laugh I hadn't heard in months because I'd been too busy destroying my life to be present in his. When they approached me formally about her husband adopting my son, I wanted to fight. Every fiber of my being screamed to hold on. But for the first time in my life, I forced myself to think about someone other than myself. I looked at my cramped studio apartment with its leaking ceiling and secondhand furniture. I remembered the times I couldn't afford his medicine, the embarrassment of bounced checks at his daycare, the nights I'd left him with random girlfriends while I went gambling. Then I thought about the opportunities he'd have with them, private schools, summer camps, family vacations, college without crushing debt. The agreement was open adoption. I could send letters, receive updates, and maybe even visit when my son was older if he wanted. I remember my hands trembling as I signed the papers in my lawyer's office. My ex-wife was crying quietly. Her husband, now my son's legal father, looked me in the eye and said, "We'll make sure he knows you did this out of love." Years passed like scenes from a movie I wasn't starring in. I sent birthday cards, Christmas presents, and letters. Sometimes I got responses, sometimes I didn't. I received school photos every year, watching my baby grow into a boy, then a teenager, through glossy 5x7 prints. I pulled myself together, not because I thought it would change anything, but because I needed my son to know that his father wasn't a total failure. I went back to school, starting with community college classes while working full-time. It took 6 years, but I got my degree in social work. I started small, working at a rehab center, then opened my own counseling practice focusing on addiction and gambling recovery. Every step forward was motivated by the hope that someday, my son would Google me and find something to be proud of. Through mutual friends and social media, I kept tabs on his life from a distance. Honor roll, soccer team captain, student council president. Each achievement was a bittersweet reminder that I'd made the right choice, even if it broke me to do it. Then last week, I got the email. He was graduating as valedictorian, and he wanted me there. My ex-wife's husband had taught him everything about business and numbers, but he'd chosen to major in social work, the same field I'd eventually gone into after getting my life together. That detail hit me like a punch to the gut. The email was formal but not cold. "I've been reading about your work with addiction recovery. It's part of why I chose this field. I know things are complicated, but I think having you there would mean a lot to both of us." I almost didn't come. What right did I have to sit here and pretend I'd contributed to his success? But my sponsor, who's been with me for 12 years now, said something that changed my mind. "You made the most selfless choice a parent can make. You earned the right to see it pay off." So here I sit, watching him approach the podium. He looks so much like me at that age that it physically hurts. Same height, same way of walking, same nervous habit of running his hand through his hair. His graduation robe is draped with honors cords and medals. I can see my ex-wife beaming with pride, her husband's arm around her shoulders. They earned this moment. I'm just grateful to witness it. Then he started speaking. Most valedictorian speeches talk about the future. He began, his voice steady and confident. But I want to talk about the past. About sacrifice. When I was 3 years old, my biological father made a decision that I've spent years trying to understand. He gave up his parental rights so I could have a better life. The room went dead silent. I could see my ex-wife's shoulders tense. Her husband pulled her closer. For years, I was angry. I read his letters, but never replied. I looked at his presents, but rarely used them. I was hurt, confused, and convinced he'd abandoned me. But as I grew older, I started to understand something about love. Sometimes, loving someone means letting them go. My vision blurred. I hadn't cried in years, not even when my mother passed away last spring. My dad, and I mean my adoptive dad, gave me everything. He taught me about business, about responsibility, about being a man. He came to every soccer game, helped with every school project, and showed me what it means to be present every single day. But my biological father taught me something else. He taught me that rock bottom isn't a place to live, but a foundation to build from. His letters showed me how he went back to school, how he started helping others who struggled like he had. He chose a harder path, being present from a distance, over pretending everything was fine. I watched as his adoptive father wiped his eyes, no longer trying to maintain his usual composed demeanor. I'm standing here today because 2 men loved me enough to put my needs first. One gave me a future by being there every day. The other gave me a future by stepping away. That's why I've chosen social work as my career. Because sometimes people don't need a hand up. They need someone to love them enough to make the hard choice. There wasn't a dry eye in the auditorium. I could see people turning around, trying to spot who this biological father might be. I sank lower in my seat, overwhelmed by emotions I couldn't even name. To my dad in the front row, thank you for choosing me every single day. And to my father in the back row, thank you for making the hardest choice so I could be standing here today. After the ceremony, I tried to slip out quietly. The crowd was thick with families taking photos and hugging graduates. I'd seen enough. I'd gotten more than I deserved. But then I heard his voice behind me. Dad. I turned around. He was standing there, still in his graduation gown, holding an envelope. Up close, the resemblance was even more striking. But his confident posture, his easy smile, that was all his adoptive father's influence. I saved all your letters, he said, holding out the envelope. Every single one. Even the ones I was too angry to respond to. They're pretty worn out now. I read them a lot when I was trying to decide what to do with my life. We stood there awkwardly for a moment before he stepped forward and hugged me. It was surreal. The last time I'd hugged him, I had to kneel down. Now he was slightly taller than me. Over his shoulder, I saw my ex-wife and her husband watching. Her husband gave me a small nod, the first acknowledgement in 15 years. My son pulled back and said, I have a lot of questions. I have a lot of answers, I replied. Some good, some bad, all honest. That's all I need, he said. Mom and Dad are taking me to dinner to celebrate. Would you want to join us? Dad suggested it actually. I looked over at them again. My ex-wife gave a small smile and nodded. I'd like that, I said, my voice rough. If you're sure. As we walked toward the restaurant, I realized something. 15 years ago, I gave up custody to give him a better future. I never imagined that future would include me. It's been 2 weeks since graduation. We're taking things slow, meeting for coffee once a week. Yesterday, he asked if he could volunteer at my counseling center over the summer before he starts college. His adoptive father is helping with the paperwork to make it official. Sometimes the universe has a way of coming full circle. I lost my son because of my addiction. Now, he wants to work alongside me, helping others break free from theirs. Edit. Thank you for all the support and awards. To answer some common questions, yes, I'm still sober. My ex-wife and her husband were surprised by the speech too, but we've had several civil conversations since then. No, I'm not trying to take any credit for my son's success. That belongs to the people who raised him. My son and I are taking things slow, building a relationship at a pace we're both comfortable with. Sometimes the hardest choices lead to the most unexpected blessings. Edit 2. A lot of people are asking about child support. Yes, I paid it until the adoption was finalized. After that, I still put money aside every month in a savings account, which I gave to my son at graduation. It wasn't much compared to what his parents provided, but I wanted him to know I never stopped thinking about my responsibilities to him. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with friends or family who might enjoy it too. Your support means a lot. And if you have any thoughts, questions, or story ideas, drop them in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next story.